Yeah, so I'm basically a mechanical engineer. I started my career with McLaren F1, and through my time there, I ended up at the track. I worked my way towards the track. I did performance engineering in 2014 for JB, and then I moved to Aston Martin, and I've done strategy for them since. So I ended there last year as head of race strategy, and yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And love sitting on the pit wall and being involved with it all. Really.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Track Limits podcast, sponsored by Formula Addict. I'm your host, Swish. I'm with my co-host, Henny, and today we have an incredible guest, a person who has been named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, person who's been a strategy engineer for multiple teams in F1, Bernie Collins. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good,
I'm
awesome.
very pleased to be here.
Yeah. How's the trip over to London?
Yeah, it was all right actually. It was very cold. Very cold in the
it
UK.
is.
Yeah.
It's freezing.
It's good.
No delays?
No delays.
Oh.
I remember
Made
when
it.
we were messaging and you were telling us where you were coming from. We actually thought you were coming from Poland.
Yeah,
we
Warsaw.
totally, we were like, Warsaw? Like, wait,
Like, what?
Why do we go to Poland?
Yeah.
Anyways, but throughout the course of this hour, Bernie, we're going to go over kind of three sections. Q1, all kind of racing related questions. Q2, diving into more of you as a professional, who you are off the track, what you're up to now. And then finally, the rapid fire round.
Oh. It's fun. I
I'm
promise.
ready. I'm ready.
Yeah.
We're going to pepper you with questions and see how fast and rapid your answers can be.
Okay.
Great. So let's get started into Q1. I think first question we ask every guest is, describe your career for us in 30 to 45 seconds. I know there's a ton to unpack there, but just tell us about some of the core accomplishments you're proud about.
Yeah, so I'm basically a mechanical engineer. I started my career with McLaren F1, and through my time there, I ended up at the track. I worked my way towards the track. I did performance engineering in 2014 for JB, and then I moved to Aston Martin, and I've done strategy for them since. So I ended there last year as head of race strategy, and yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And love sitting on the pit wall and being involved with it all, really.
And for people who are, newer fans who might not really know kind of what a race engineer does, tell us a little bit about kind of what goes under your job responsibilities. What are you in charge of?
Yeah, so strategy engineers basically trying to get the best out of the car and trying to get the best finishing result. So we generally look after both drivers. So there's two drivers to a team. And you're not responsible for how fast the car is or how competitive you can be, but you're trying to get the most out of the car. So if you think that your expected points are X, then you're always trying to do a little bit better than that. So that's through decisions we make on the pit wall, which tyres we fit, what stop lap we choose, how we react to safety cars or weather conditions or any of these sorts of things. And then a lot of it's sort of the analysis after the event, like what we could have done better or what we could learn from what someone else did. Or looking, pre-event, what our plans are for Friday practice, how we're going to do our long runs, what we're going to do in qualifying. So there's a lot that goes into it, but ultimately it's points on the board at the end of Sunday.
Yeah. And for newer fans who love to watch the sport or even just watch the races on Sundays, they really don't understand what goes behind the scenes because they just watch the drivers and enjoy that part. But what happens on that pit wall with you guys on race weekends?
Yeah, so a lot of it is, like, if you just think of the strategy function, a lot is reacting to what's going on around it. So there may be a safety car. What are you going to do? Are you going to stop? Are you going to change tyres? And we hear a lot of the, on the TV, the interaction between the driver and the race engineer or whatever. And we're trying to, take that information from the driver and make the best use of it. So in the garage, you get a range of different engineers. Some are looking at, data specific to the engine or to the gearbox or whatever it might be. Some people are looking at overall car setup. So how do we make the car a little bit faster through the various mechanical setup or aero setups that we can do? And then the strategist is looking at how can we react to everyone else. We're looking a lot at lap times of other people, a lot at our own lap times, tyre temperatures, all these sorts of things. So there's a whole range of data coming at you from all sorts of sides. And then maybe what people don't realise is we work on the pit wall or at the track, but then also there's a whole team back in the factory. So we're trying to talk to those guys all the time, keep in touch with them, fill them in on what's going on because they're not in the same environment that we are. So yeah, it's really interesting dynamic, but it's really heavy data led.
And how does that team mesh? What's the dynamic in that pit wall or inside the factories?
Yeah, it's really interesting because on the pit wall sometimes things are really obvious because you're there and you're living it. It's windy or it's really wet or whatever it might be. And you're trying to convey that to people in the factory who are in this nice air-conditioned room. Often it's the middle of the night where they are because of wherever you are in the world. So there's that dynamic where they're tired and grumpy because it's midnight in the UK and they should be in bed, or we're tired and grumpy because we're jet lagged. So there's a lot going on across it. We generally deal in like an intercom system. So it's fully live communication to the pit wall or to the office when we're sat in there. And then a lot of data goes live back to the factory as well, you know, a very small lag. So they're seeing a lot of the data that we're seeing just in a like more controlled environment, which has advantages, right? Because they don't have as much emotion and they don't have like the heat of Singapore or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting dynamic.
And when it came to the role itself, like how did you even get into it? Like what's the process like of becoming a race engineer? I mean, is there a test? Do you have to play F1 manager? Like what do you have to do?
That would be good to have. I think for me, you know, I started as a design engineer and then I made the move to trying to get more involved in the track. So I did performance engineering. Now that's pretty unusual, but like a lot of people start with like vehicle dynamics and more like the fundamentals of how the car works together. And then from that, you know, move into the race engineering role. For me, I ended up doing a lot of like trackside experience in not Formula One. So I did a lot of GT racing and things in order to get some trackside experience, get some experience working with some drivers. So I sort of built up like all of the stuff I did at the weekend in order to prove I wanted to be at the track in F1. For strategy, a lot of people do like mathematics degrees and stuff, so not even engineering that I did. And tends to be that people start in the factory doing a lot of like research and then move towards sort of the trackside environment. So there's lots of like different bits of progression, but not necessarily a test.
Do you think that needs to be a standard moving forward?
To have a test? I think it's really interesting because like the reason we have strategists on the pit wall is because it's not all obvious in the data what you should do. So you've got like a bit of human reaction, a bit of communications with others. So it's a bit like you get people who are smart academically and people who are smart like in real life. And it's a bit that mix where you need like a good combination of both. So it would be really hard to devise a test to do it.
For that. Is it true? Like, I don't know if I read this on Twitter or something, but the Mercedes in their factories will do about 30,000 different sessions of just running the same sessions to see which one's the best optimal. Is that something that all teams do? Like, what is that like?
There could be two things that it means. So sometimes, like if we're training up a new member of staff, we can like replay a session and get their reaction to things and what they would do. So we do that a lot to sort of like allow staff to practice. But what we do like on a Saturday night when we've got all the qualifying positions, we've estimated what we think the tyres will do. We've estimated the car pace. We start to run like simulations then of what we think will play out in the race. So we run like 100,000 race sims.
Wow.
We give like we give the cars like lots of variability so they can do a 1, 2, 3 stop with different probabilities or different stop laps and react to things in different ways. And what you're trying to find is what gives the overall best finishing position, and that's probably your chosen strategy. So it allows cars to race against each other and get stuck in traffic and have to overtake and all these things. But yeah, like you start that process on a Thursday or Wednesday before you go to the track, and like you've got loads of unknowns then, and as you go through the weekend you build the unknowns, so you like formulate your tire model a bit better. On Saturday you've got your qualifying positions, so you've got all these things that mean by Sunday morning you've got a pretty good idea at least of the starting positions. And then like some teams do it that during the race, like as you delete, you know, you move further in, you've got more and more of the knowns, like you know your position on lap 10 or whatever, so you can rerun the sim again type thing. So yeah, it's really, there's a lot of interaction there with simulation.
And if you're running the sim so many times, how often do you guys leave a race week and then saying like, holy crap, I did not see that coming at all?
I think like the thing that's like difficult is, you know, even on Saturday night when you run the simulations with qualifying position, generally by the first corner the positions are all different again. So like as much variability as you can build into it, you might end up with something that's a really small percentage of the sims that you ran for loads of reasons, or like often we've got to the grid and it's like suddenly raining that nobody's seen coming or whatever it might be. So yeah, we have a base plan, but we've got like all these other plans that we're working to as well. So often it's not something that you totally didn't see coming, but like there's loads of things where it has been something that was like, whoa, nobody had that on. Or like the running joke would be you'd be leaving the pit wall and someone would say, I didn't see that in the strategy report. It's like, yeah, that wasn't in my report, so that's fine.
Neat.
And I've always been fascinated by when we are watching the races and let's say a safety car comes on or, you know, rain happens. what is that initial hierarchy of decision making that goes on where we have to change to either the tires or we have to pit? Like, how does that go?
Yeah, so I think like let's say the safety car ones, pretty straightforward, or more straightforward in the fact that we discuss that so much.
Yeah.
So even in the laps before, we're discussing what would happen now if we have a safety car. So like we have that discussion like time and time again. But if you think of like, I guess the best example is in Bahrain in 2020 when Checo won the race. He crashed on lap 1. So you've got like some people whose responsibility is to check if the car is damaged, some people's responsibility to check if we need new tires. Then I'm looking at if we should change tires anyway or not. So everyone's got like these different bits of responsibility that they're building into the bigger picture. And then once we have that bigger picture, then it's really like the race strategist decision if we are going to change for whatever reason, or it might be like the race engineer's decision if something's damaged and we need to stop for XYZ. So there's a few like different decisions that you make, but generally you get people from the factory giving information to the pit walls, so be that the race engineer or the strategist. And how the comms work is the strategist will make a decision that we're going to stop or not, and then they tell the race engineer, such that the driver only ever hears the race engineer's voice. So there is like quite a good hierarchy, but like sometimes people will go, are you sure about this decision? And then you have to like double check and decide again, but it's okay.
And for a lot of these decisions, this is happening like within seconds.
Yeah.
Like that whole hierarchy you just mentioned is happening from like point A to point B in like a couple seconds.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like anytime in a group project, there's obviously some times where one person doesn't maybe live up to potential, right?
Yeah.
Or even on the, engineers, for example, that are doing pit stops, for example, maybe one doesn't have the best performance and it legs the entire team down. Is that the same thing with the strategy team as well, where like there have been moments where in a team, one person maybe wasn't performing as well, which did kind of crumble the speed in which decisions were being made?
Yeah, sure. So like we have like the Bahrain example, the qualifying lap that year was 53 seconds. So Checo was a shunt at the start of the lap. You've got something around that time to make a decision before he gets to the end of the lap. We end up like I say, like splitting the roles. So we've got like 4 or 5 people on the team. Someone will just be watching lap times. Someone will just be watching video, whatever it might be. And we do try and give people as much responsibility as we can, because it encourages their learning. And really, we don't really have time for anything else. So I don't have time to double check all of the work. And the way we deal with that is we do like loads of analysis afterwards. So if someone maybe hasn't made a decision that quickly, or maybe made the wrong decision, we go through it all afterwards and say, how can we make that better next time round? But like it is a process, and you do really need to rely on the people in the team.
And how much do the drivers, like, I mean, you worked with people like Checo and Sebastian Vettel and Nico Hülkenberg. Like, how much do the drivers get to influence the strategy? Do you see that once in a while they're overriding the decisions that you guys are making?
I think it's a bit of a mix, and it's very driver dependent. So like, for example, we do a lot of the discussion on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning with the drivers. Like they need to be really on board with whatever plan you're doing. Often people will say, like Sebastian was very good at saying, oh, have you thought about XYZ? Or what if this car does this? Or sometimes you'll have drivers that will have done that race like 5 or 6 years before, and they'll go, oh, I don't want what happened to me back then to happen again. So they'll have something like historic that you need to talk about. But you'll have loads of conversation with them over the Saturday and Sunday. Normally, I was really lucky that the drivers I worked with were pretty good at just taking whatever decision it was and carrying it out. And then, like I say, we'd go through it afterwards, right or wrong. I think the times where they've not have been like, there's some really famous examples, like the Russia wet example, where we called them into pit and they were like, no, it's dry.
Yeah.
But then when they get round to turn 2 or 3, they're like, actually, it's quite wet. Yeah. But there's lots of like, there have been times where, ultimately they need to pull the car into the pit lane. So there have been a few, but again, we just go through and go, this is the pieces of data that we had at the time, whatever. But I've been very lucky in that there hasn't been the like intense argument that you see from some of the pit walls, I think.
And what do you think about the current grid and how these cars are, constantly changing with these regulations? Drivers are complaining it's getting heavy and it's getting slower. Some are saying it's faster. The overtakes are happening more. But as a strategist like you, what is your opinion on the current grid and how it's moving forward?
Yeah, I think like when I think of like the regulations, I think the weight of the cars have a very small effect, like a strategy team. But I think it is sort of in a cycle of the cars are getting heavier, then we need to make them safer, so you're adding on more weight, and it just becomes like this cycle. I think the going towards the more sustainable engines and stuff is good. The new tires, and I'm hoping as we get into it that the tires start to produce more multiple stop races, because that's what's exciting. Like people want to see more pit stops. And if they see more pit stops, they'll see more overtaking. So I think a lot of it comes down to having like reasonably high degradation tires that encourage that sort of movement in the track. In terms of like the grade and the people that are involved, I think it's really interesting to see. So like we've got some new guys this year, we've got some people returning. So, and we've got lots of movement. Like even the team managers are moving about this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see, like, you know, it's quite a big move for someone to step into a team, and nobody that steps into a team is going to affect that team straight away. It's going to take a little bit of time. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see all of those dynamics play out a little bit, I think.
And we've heard of like the legendary tales, obviously. I mean, Max and GP, Lewis, Bono. Like, how do you think engineers typically build really good driver affinities? Like, how do they get along so well with drivers? Is that just a consequence of time and how long you spend with them, or is there something else as well?
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit of both, because it's like anyone that you work really closely with, and these guys are working together like a lot of the time and going through an all else together. You'll end up, you know, the driver would have to, if you get to a point where the driver needs to say very little and it's totally understood by the pit wall, and that's a really good situation to be in. Like almost like you're in a relationship with someone and you can finish their sentence. Like that sort of like relationship is like, exactly. Like that's the goal you're aiming for, is that you understand completely what their problem might be or what their need might be. And it varies loads, but yeah, like the partnerships that you've described, the people that have been together for a few years, like that really breeds strength. And even things like, you know, like Lewis's fame for being really complaining a lot on the radio, and Bono takes a lot of abuse, but he knows the like passion that he carries, and he probably doesn't mean that when he gets out of the car and all these things. So again, there are things that you can sort of get away with when you've worked together for a long time, but maybe not with a new engineer. So yeah, it's just like, and even just like in the garage or in the office when we're talking about strategy stuff, to be fit to explain something to Sebastian or Lance or whatever, and then fully understand what I mean, and me fully understand their reaction to it, is really quite, you know, it's quite important that you sort of build that relationship with them.
Right. And that's a person who, I think, you know, obviously you've been part of teams, but I'm guessing you also have studied the strategy of other teams as well. I mean, this last season, like there were, I think everybody became a strategist at a certain point during certain races. But I mean, obviously Ferrari was being criticized quite heavily for a lot of, you know, missteps in their strategy. What did you think kind of about, you know, their team and their makeup? Like, is it, you know, just a different organization? That's why they were messing up, or is it something else there?
Yeah, I think like there's a few things. Is like, when you look at some strategists, and like even some strategies that maybe we would have done from the outside, people find it hard to understand like why you put on that tire or why you stayed out so long. But there must be something in your modeling or in your department that means you couldn't stop on the lap that you wanted to. So like some really good examples are, we would have had it in the past where there might have been some debris caught in the brake duct that would push you to stop early because you needed to remove that debris. And that's not obvious to everyone on the outside. So there's loads of little things that sometimes affect what you do that we don't see. And it's so easy after a race to go, and what we should have done. But I think, you know, reading between the lines a little bit with Ferrari, a lot of it, and especially what's been said, you know, post-season, I think it's more the hierarchy. So like, if I decide that we want to stop on a lap, but it needs 3 people above me to approve it, then you've already missed the lap. You've already missed the decision. So I think a little bit appears to be from the outside, you know, not pure strategy, but just the structure that's around that team. And, you know, equally, if you have a few races that go negatively and strategy gets blamed, then people start to take safe decisions, or not take decisions at all because that's safer than taking them. So I think I'm really hopeful that in the off season there's like a full reset, and then they come back with loads more confidence, because like none of these guys are stupid, right? Like they're really intelligent guys, and they've got their, not through a test, but through some method. So like they know what they're doing. And I think it's just a structure around them. Like in my role, I was really lucky in Aston Martin that I always felt really safe to make decisions. And even if it went wrong, I didn't feel like I would be criticised, but we'd go through it later and figure out what we could have done differently. And as strategists, you need to feel really safe to make decisions, or you'll just freeze.
And taking you back to Force India, and, you know, the lack of money that was happening during that season, you guys were still able to perform at a high level, getting podiums and having a fast car. What was that like, that experience like?
Yeah, it was really like that point of time where we were Force India. Personally was great for me. I was given the, effectively the head of race strategy role at that stage because there was a lack of people and a lack of engineers. So I stepped up to this role that I probably wouldn't have otherwise been given. And was fit to like really embrace it and work with it. Everyone was like working really hard because there was not enough people to do everything, but it meant you did some really interesting things that you would have otherwise not have done. And we had a lot of fun, like we were like a little family. We were all traveling together and like everyone was having a lot of fun. So it was a really great time. It was difficult and there was a lot of hours and work, but yeah, it was really good fun.
And then what about Sakir? Tell us a bit about that race, like from start to finish. I mean, Checo's crashing out, like, was that turn 1, 2?
Yeah, it was like, turn 2, I think it's Sakir.
Yeah. And I mean, that must have been like, oh, well, the race is pretty much over. We're going to try to get some points, but like getting the race win was probably unimaginable for you guys at that point. Like, tell us a bit about the weekend and kind of the emotions that you had going through that.
Yeah, like it was a really difficult, it was the end of that season. It was 2 races from the end. Checo at that stage, I don't know what was happening in reality, but was announced not to be having a drive the next season. So he was leaving Aston Martin, or Racing Point as we were, but didn't have a drive. So, there was a feeling that we wanted something big to happen. I think we hadn't had a podium that year. And it was one of the few years where we'd not. And yeah, like you say, the interesting thing with that race for me, looking back on it, was we'd not moved venues. So we were still in Bahrain. It was 1 week after the race before. We still had the same garages. We still had the same pit wall. Like you look down at turn 1, it's exactly the same. But the track was so different. Like it was a really short lap time compared to the week before. It was much harder to overtake. It was much lower degradation. So it became this like really track position 1-stop race from a multiple stop race the week before. So without having physically moved, you needed to really change your mindset into what the next week was going to be. And I think we were really good as a team at doing that. And so was Checo. And yeah, you had the crash lap 1, which you're just like, it's like we've qualified so well. But then, in many ways he took out one of the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. So that's 2 people that we, probably should have finished ahead. But yeah, you do this like frantic analysis of if the car's okay and if we should stop. And interestingly, the car was totally okay and we could have continued, but we stopped anyway because we knew the medium tyre was better than the soft. And that was one of those decisions that because we'd done all the work pre-event, we knew the medium was going to be better. So, and it was one of the ones where like the race engineer turned around to me and he goes, "Are you sure about this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." And we stopped. And because we stopped, we were on a much faster tyre than everyone else who was forced to start in the soft. And we had a good car that weekend. And then we stuck to like our 1 stop when other people did 2 or stopped under safety cars. And obviously Mercedes had the incidents. Even if we'd finished P3 that weekend, it would have been a fantastic result for the team. But yeah, it was. And then you just get to the podium and you're just like, this is just like movie gold, because he didn't have a drive as far as we knew. And that was his first win and my first win. And for a lot of people in the team, their first win. So yeah, it felt really like fantastic for what we were doing. And it was so close to the end of the season and people were tired and it had been a tough run. So yeah, it was really, really cool.
Incredible.
Big night out.
Last question in Q1. I mean, tell us a bit about why you stepped back from the world of F1 and then kind of what you're doing now. I think you're consulting quite a bit. Like, tell us a little bit about what you're excited about, the work you're doing now. Yeah,
cool. So yeah, I stepped back. Like, I loved what I do. I did the traveling for 7 years, every event. Pretty much the last few, I missed a few and worked from the factory. But yeah, the calendar just like post-COVID became so hectic with the triple headers and stuff. And the triple headers mean you go away the week before and you're away for the full event and doing all the analysis after. So you just get to like 3 in a row and you feel like I'm pretty broken now. And you're just not enjoying it where you really should be. So in December the start of the season, I decided to step away. So I did my 6 months notice, which was great because I got to still go to my events, still got to sit in the pit wall, still got to enjoy it. And I actually enjoyed it loads more knowing I was leaving, because it was like, this might be my last time to do this or my last time to do that. So yeah, that was cool. And then, yeah, since that, I've done a variety of things that like are just really ad hoc, but I'm sort of enjoying. So I did some work with Formula One, explaining some strategies on like their YouTube channel.
Nice.
And that's quite nice because it's one of those, I wouldn't have done it like this, where you can just criticize what other people have done and not worry too much about making decisions. But you sort of feel like you're bringing your knowledge to the general public. So fit to explain things in a more broken down way. So that was really cool. I did a few of those, and I'm hoping that those will maybe continue into this season. I did some work with Sky on their like Any Driven Monday series, again trying to explain like little aspects of the strategy stuff to the best of my ability. And yeah, hopefully those two projects continue going forward, which I think is interesting and exciting because up until the middle of last year I'd not watched a race from 2009, not being part of a team. So it's been really nice to watch it again, see what the coverage is like. And when you watch a race as a strategist, you only watch your driver and the person before. So now I see what the whole field's doing. And that's
frustrated though, or are you like, God, you're so dumb, what are you doing?
Some of it's frustration, but then some of it's like, I don't know what's going on, I don't have enough data. So some of it's like, I need a data feed. But so I'm doing things like that. And then the other thing that I'm doing that's been like quite interesting from my point of view is bringing some of the lessons of F1 to other corporate industries. So you know, the decision making that we do or the data led analysis that we do, like what are the lessons from that other industries can use to improve. So yeah, it's been good fun so far. So let's see.
Brilliant.
It's beautiful.
That wraps up Q1. Any verdict?
That was a very, very... I was about to go purple, but I think with a nice green sector. Yeah, that's a solid green.
Amazing. Well, we'll see if Bernie's able to get a purple in Q2. Stay tuned. We want to give a big shout out to one of our partners, AG1. Now, a couple years ago, all I was having was a vitamin C and a multivitamin. But a few months ago, Henny, I came to you.
Indeed, you did.
And I told you, I want to find one thing that has everything, all the vitamins, all the probiotics in one. And you gave me AG1.
Took you long enough.
Why do you like AG1?
I love AG1 because it just felt like I didn't have to take 75 pills just to get my nutritional value. I would wake up, my morning routine consisted of me right before breakfast taking that scoop, and I had all my value all in one little scoop.
And it works, honestly. I've been taking it for a few months. Zoom in. Look at this skin. Oh, luscious. Unfathomable. But also, I know a lot of people are concerned about how expensive AG1 is, but when you look at the cost per serving, it's actually not that expensive.
No, not at all.
It's cheaper than most energy drinks, coffee brands out there.
If you want to take ownership of your health, try AG1 now and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/tracklimits. That is drinkag1.com/tracklimits.
All right, welcome back to the Track Limits podcast. We're here with Bernie. We're now going to get into Q2, where we're going to try to learn a little bit more about you as a person. So I want to take you back. You went to Queen's University, Belfast.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the origin story. What did you study? Did you ever envision a career in motorsport when you were going to college?
Well, I think it's like, so I did engineering. I did mechanical engineering in Queen's. And I did that because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And when I looked at like the different like subjects you could do, that was the one that had the broadest range of potential careers at the end of it. So it sort of felt like just like kicking the decision down the road a little bit. And I really enjoyed my engineering stuff. That was great. And it was only really during that I even thought about doing motorsport or automotive, which is a bit stupid, but in Northern Ireland, a lot of the like mechanical engineers go on to do aeronautical stuff or the aerospace sector. So yeah, it was a bit like that's where I thought I would end up going more than towards the motorsport side.
Right. And I think it was reported that you were one of 3 female students in a class of 30. Was that like reflective of maybe your career even in F1? Like it is a male dominated industry.
Yeah, sure. So like I actually think like compared to some of the people I've heard that did mechanical engineering, they're like 10% is actually a reasonably good number.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think that's got better and better over the years. I think and like then it was okay. Yeah, it's really interesting at times when I was trying to think back the other day to my time at McLaren when I joined in the design office. And I don't think as like a mechanical designer, there was anyone else in the design office that was female. Like there was some people in aeronautical or in the aero department, or there was some people in like the systems departments. But I think it was really low numbers. And even sort of as I left sort of Aston Martin Force India, there's definitely female representation in all of the departments now. But when I think of like our race meeting where we like sat in a big room, I was generally the only female in that room. Or occasionally I'd end up going along to like the FIA meetings where we discuss regulations and things. And then I was like the only female in that room. Right. So you often do end up in a situation where you're, you know, at that 10% or lower. But it's getting loads better. It didn't feel like unusual at the time.
Yeah.
So.
And you also mentioned that you never even want to be employed in motorsport. What was that switch? What made you change?
It's just because I think whenever because I did watch F1 when I was little, and you watch it and you see the drivers and stuff, but you don't really think about all the other jobs that people can do. Yeah. And especially like years ago, didn't really even show the pit wall or anything. It just showed like the races and the pit stops. Whereas now I think we're loads better at understanding, okay, it takes all these people in the factory to build the cars or whatever. And I just hadn't thought about it. So yeah, I started my engineering degree and I actually did some work for a gas and chemicals company during that, which was sort of what I seen myself doing. And then in the last 2 years, I did a thing called Formula Student. So we built like a little single-seater race car. We raced it against other universities. And it was like that process of we did the design and everything. And I thought, oh, I quite like this. I quite like having some design, like having some stuff, like having some build, having some trackside stuff. And we actually raced it 2 weeks after the Formula One in Silverstone. So you get to do, it was really cool actually, because you got to like, there was an acceleration event where it was just like do a straight line. And because I was the lightest, I did the acceleration event. But it was like down the start, finish straight at Silverstone. It was just like, it was really cool. So it was only really because of that I thought, oh, I should consider like more automotive things or motorsport things. And then just in my like last year, McLaren sent out like advertisements for their graduate scheme. And I applied to that, but sort of applied thinking, probably not going to get it, but let's just see what happens. And yeah, like even then when I was doing the interviews and things, I was like, well, at least I'll go and get to see McLaren. So it doesn't really matter if I get it or not. So yeah, it was quite a big turn from sort of third year of uni to 3 years later being at McLaren.
Wow. And did you always want to be a driver growing up or what?
No, I think it was just that I knew that I probably wasn't good enough to be a driver. So I sort of didn't really think about the sport then as a result of that.
Yeah, but you were a fan of the sport.
Yeah, exactly. You would watch it and stuff, but you just didn't think of being involved with it. Like even at home, there would be a lot of like rallying or like a motorbike racing and stuff, but you didn't even really think of the engineers that go into making that happen. So yeah, it's really interesting that I just hadn't thought about it.
And what about being like a race strategist and an engineer simultaneously? Like I think not a lot of people do both or have seen both sides.
Yeah.
What kind of inspired you to go and kind of pursue both tracks?
I think it was just the way it happened. So like I started in McLaren and I sort of felt I hadn't really considered the strategy bit. I'd really considered the race engineering bit. And when you do like junior Formula sports, so like the GT stuff, they never have two of those people and the strategy is really limited. So like in the GT stuff, you've generally got a pit window that you're aiming for and things. So I just pursued the race engineer, like data engineer, that type of role. And I really got into trying to improve the car and improve the driver. And I really loved that. And it was only really when I moved to Aston that the strategy stuff came along. And that was really bizarre as well, because that wasn't like a chosen route, if that makes sense. Like I went to Aston or Force India as it was, doing like half performance and half strategy. And then when I got there, the strategist left and they were like, we know we said it was half performance, half strategy, but now you're just doing strategy. I was like,
you are the strategist.
I was like, I've not done any strategy before. So let's see. But you do have, you've picked up bits of race experience. And that was really interesting because it's actually, it's Randy who's at McLaren now, was there. And we had 2 races where we overlapped. There was one other strategist on him. So he had one race where he showed me what he was doing and a second race where he tried to let me do it. And then the third race, he was gone. I was like, okay.
Oh, no.
So it was like quite a big leap at the time. But yeah, it was really great that those guys showed faith in me to do it. And so the strategist stuff sort of happened more than a choice. But I think loads of things in my career have happened more than choice.
Yeah. And for people who want to pursue a career in either race engineering or race strategist, what kind of education do they need? What kind of circle do they have to be a part of? Or who do they have to reach out to, that you think?
Yeah, so I think, like, for me, you know, the most common route is to do like a really strong mechanical engineering degree. A lot of strategists actually do mathematics degrees or statistics degrees, like that type of thing. Or more and more we're seeing sort of data science-y type roles, because there's so much more of that now, especially in the strategy department. The engineering bit, I think the difficult thing is that the number of, if you think of the number of engineers in the world and then the number that are in Formula One, well, the number in the pit wall is so minimal. Like, you've got one strategist a team and 2 race engineers a team, so you're down to like a very small number of people. But it's just about working hard at it. The one thing that I thought was really beneficial was trying to get some experience. So, you know, a junior formula, you know, your local karting team, your local racetrack, your local GT team are normally crying out for people to help. So you can get some like data or race engineering experience, or just see what those guys are doing. And that really stands well when you try and get into an F1 team. And then loads of the teams now are doing like apprenticeships and graduate schemes and things. So it's just about getting in and proving that you're prepared to work hard initially.
Correct.
No, I was going to say, and for women that want to also enter the sport, do you think that FIA F1 is doing a great job in trying to ensure that this is going to continue to happen and have more women leadership?
Yeah, I think so. And I think like all of the teams are really trying hard on it. And I think in recent years, especially, people are trying a bit better with the working hours and sort of trying to make things quite flexible. But like for me personally, I've never experienced any negative things being a female in F1, or any sort of roadblocks to that position. So I think the teams are pretty fair in that if you're the best person for the job, the rest of it doesn't matter. But I think there's a lot of encouragement out there, and there's loads of things that, you know, I've got involved with, or other girls in the sport have got involved with, to encourage young girls to think about engineering. Because I think the problem for me was that 15, nobody was telling me I should go and do engineering. It just wasn't a discussion. So they're trying to make that better, which is really good.
In terms of culture, I mean, you transitioned also from McLaren to, well, I guess Force India, Racing Point, Aston Martin.
Yeah.
That culture, was it different? How did that kind of make you feel in terms of having to adapt? And I mean, I'm also curious, from Force India to Racing Point to Aston Martin, if that even changed.
Yeah, so like the McLaren to Force India was huge, because McLaren were such a big, well-established team, and they had like a lot more resource, a lot more money. So yeah, it felt huge, that move. You go to Force India, as it was at the time, you got a much smaller factory. You walk into the design office and you're like, where is everybody? Like, there's 5 times the people at McLaren. And I used to work in suspension design for a while at McLaren, and there was like 10 of us, and then you go to Force India, there's like 1 guy. I'm like, what were we doing before? So like that felt like a really huge transition. It had positives and negatives, like the canteen wasn't as nice, or there wasn't a gym or whatever. But like the people were really friendly and worked really well together, and the atmosphere was like really like everyone pulling along together, everyone trying to work really hard. So the atmosphere was amazing. And then the other changes, so like the Force India Racing Point, Aston Martin, like that was much more gradual and happened much more, you know, it's the same team, we're in the same building, like they're moving building this year, but it was much more like a progression, and it's happened much more slowly over time. So I think if I went now from Aston Martin back to the old Force India, it would be the same shock as it was from McLaren. But that's happened so much more gradually over time. So there's not been the same swing change there, if you like.
Yeah. And is there 1 or 2 moments that you would like to share, other than Secure winning in 2020, that you're like, this is the moment, that part of your career?
I think, yeah, there've probably been a few. Most of them are probably like the podium stuff. I think the podiums that stand out was, my first one was Russia 2015. I'd only been with the team a few months. And you sort of think, as a non-strategist really at that stage, oh, this might actually be okay with the support and stuff that you have around you. So that was great. That was my first podium with the team. The Monaco podium was amazing. Like that was good and tough, because Checo had a really good race and Nico had a really bad race, for very similar decisions actually that were made, but just slightly at the wrong time. And that was really unfortunate. But so some of the teams quite sad and some of the teams quite happy. So it's a mixed emotion, that one. But yeah, those are sort of the ones that stand out. I think the only other one that stands out that maybe doesn't on paper is there was a Brazil where we actually finished 4th, a really wet one, but we made every decision correctly. So from a strategist point of view, I felt like every decision was really good for the right reasons, and we'd really like hung on to our nerve quite a lot. So yeah, those are the ones probably.
Super cool. And when it came to the drivers you worked with, what was the biggest thing that surprised you about them? Like, as somebody, again, who potentially even wanted to be a driver at some point.
Yeah, I think the drivers I work with, I think the biggest thing that people on the outside don't understand is how approachable they are and how helpful they generally are. Like, I started with Jensen in 2014 and I was very new to performance engineering, and Jensen had obviously a few years experience, but he was really helpful in terms of knowing that I was trying to help him, and you're trying to get the best out of each other, and he knows that developing me as an engineer is helpful to that. So yeah, I think for all of them, it's been that they're much more normal people than we maybe give them credit for at times. So, and you know, particularly 2 years ago when Sebastian joined the team, and he's this like mighty figure of the sport, and everyone's like a little bit apprehensive about him joining, or, you know, me personally, how harsh, he's renowned for his strategy criticism. So how tough it's going to be. But actually, it was a really lovely experience, and I'm really glad I had that opportunity to meet him and get to know him. So yeah, I think the thing that's shocking is how approachable they generally are and how easy they are at times to work with. Not always, but at times.
Oh, we're gonna all miss that.
Yeah. Were you sad when he called it quits?
Well, yes and no, because he called it quits on the weekend I was leaving.
Oh, wow.
So it was like my final weekend. The weekend was meant to be about me, and then suddenly Seb announces it, and I was like, what? It's like all these people are outside the motorhome, not for my last race. But yeah, like I feel shocked and not shocked at the same time that he called it then, because I know that like he's a lot of other commitments, a lot of other things he wants to do. But yeah, I think he was really good for the sport, and like hopefully he will in his own way continue to be involved. So who knows? And you know, maybe he gets out of the car and he's like, oh, I really miss it, and he's back.
He wants to come back.
Yeah.
What was the balance between, you know, you mentioned that you've traveled a lot, attended almost every race. What was that work-life balance for you? How did you find the fun of it?
Well, yeah, it's weird because sometimes now you speak to people and they're like, well, what's your hobbies? I'm like, I don't have hobbies. I don't have time for hobbies. But yeah, it's like, especially a few years ago, you just try to enjoy as much as you can. So enjoy the races you were. Like, you would go to Australia for the first race of the year. You would be very busy in the run up to that. But then where I could, I tried to stay out the week after in Australia. And you would be working on all your analysis. You would do like a 9 to 5 day, but then you'd have that weekend off in Australia or whatever it might be. So I tried to like make the most of the traveling aspect by fitting in whatever holidays, and we had some fantastic holidays. I was really lucky for the majority of the time that my other half was with a different team. So it meant that we could do our dinners out and our nights away, and there wasn't someone at home going, when are you going to be back? So yeah, like you try to just make the most of your time when you're there. And it is difficult for sure. But then particularly in the last 6 months, you realise this is not an opportunity that everyone gets. So not everyone gets to stand in the pit lane or to sit on the pit wall. So yeah, it's been really great. And especially like when you were young and could do all the holidays, I loved it and see all the different cultures.
And do your friends even understand what you do?
I think some of them do. And I think like I've been fortunate enough to get some of them into the paddock and they've been fit to see around. And I always find it interesting when you get people who don't know a lot about Formula One, and then they're like, God, there's like loads of team members and it's much more team sport than I thought it was, which is like would have been my impression watching the TV, that it was just one driver. So yeah, they sort of understand. I think what people don't understand is that like on a Friday when the sessions are on, or after the sessions you're doing your debriefs or you're doing like all your reporting and stuff, like people don't understand how you can have time to look at your phone and reply to one message. People are like, I texted you like 3 days ago and you've not replied. I'm like, yeah, I've been really busy. You're like, how could, nobody's that busy? But it's like, well, no, I genuinely am. So I think that's the bit that people maybe don't get.
Fair enough. Well, I think that wraps up Q2. Henny, verdict? Faster?
That was a purple set.
Purple. All right.
Was a purple
I feel like
set
I've
there.
achieved something.
Well, we're going to get into the rapid fire round soon. This is actually going to be a test now for Birdie.
Real, yeah.
So we'll see how she does in Q3. All right, welcome back to the final segment of the Track Limits interview with Bernie. We're now going to get into the rapid fire round. Birdie, any...
I'm nervous.
Yeah, okay, good.
Good.
Yeah,
That's what we want.
Yeah.
This is like starter race nerves.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go through all these questions. Try to keep your answers rapid and full of fire. Here
Okay.
we go. First question. What is your favorite track to be a strategist on?
So I think my favorite is probably somewhere like Bahrain because it's like easy to overtake. So you can make loads of decisions that are different to like the normal track position ones.
Perfect. Bernie, I'm about to show you a photo. Please explain what was happening in here because I don't know if the photo did you justice here, but it seems like you were jumping up and Checo's right behind you.
Oh, okay. So this is one where I think it's going to rain.
Okay.
So generally you put your hand out to check if it's raining or not because we have loads of sensors on like that tell us loads of things, but sometimes they're wrong or sometimes they're not accurate.
Yeah.
So like put your hand out and check if it's raining or not. And I think just Checo's like,
right
what?
there.
Yeah. But normally what's happening, this is not quick. Normally what's happening is in the garage, the guys are all looking at you, giving you abuse for putting your hand out to check it. So they're just like, I'm like, we can see it's raining. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I love that. What is your least favorite track to be a strategist on?
Oh, I think that's probably ones like the Monaco Singapores are quite hard because you make one call and it needs to be absolutely right and there's like loads of pressure.
Nice. What regulation change would you institute? Double points on the last race?
Yeah,
Something like
so this is pretty controversial, I think. I would get rid of Friday.
Oh, so no practice.
No practice, just like do FP3, qualify
Wow.
and race. Because the races that we don't have a Friday or it's like wet or whatever,
Yeah.
people go into Saturday with no idea what's going on.
No data. Yep.
So you just need to make a load more decisions. And like most engineers hate that idea because they're like, no, I want to do my tests. But
Yeah.
I think it would make it so much more interesting.
Wow.
And it would be one less day to work. So
Yeah. Like, I get a day off.
The driver that you've worked with that you prefer the most, whether it's Sergio,
Oh.
Nico,
It's getting
Seth.
spicy.
Yeah. They're all great.
They're
Let's
all
preface that.
great.
Yeah.
if anyone's listening, they're my favorite. I love Sebastian.
Nice.
Most recently, yeah.
Which driver would you trust to drive you blindfolded around a track? They're blindfolded, you're in the car.
They're blindfolded.
Yes.
None of them.
That's the
I
second
thought
time we
maybe
got
I was
this.
blindfolded, but no,
Not
none.
even Checo after he did the whole Mexico video.
No, because I don't like. Even if I was blindfolded and they were not,
Yeah.
I don't trust them not to make the opportunity to really frighten me. So
That's true.
I think no.
Okay. Greatest driver of all time in your opinion?
Oh, I think. Well, this is difficult because it's so subjective to what you've had when you were little. But I grew up watching Michael Schumacher. So someone like that, someone like Senna has to be up there. So those are probably the two names that spring to mind.
If you were an F1 driver, what team would you choose?
Oh, Red Bull seems like a lot of fun, but I think Mercedes are probably where I would be at. Yeah.
Okay. What is one skill a race engineer absolutely needs to have? Like you just need to have it.
Patience.
Patience.
Patience. And maybe read between the lines. So I think a lot of people say things but mean something different.
Cool.
But patience probably.
Nice. Which race engineer do you respect the most?
Oh, I'm going to veto that one.
Nice. We got our first veto.
Let's go.
Love it.
What piece of F1 memorabilia do you currently own that you have a lot of love for, or would you like to own?
What I would love to have a helmet. I would love to have a driver helmet. I think that's really special to have one of those. What I was given when I left Force India was, I've been given two things. I was given a rear wing end plate that the team signed when I left Force India. So my current problem is trying to figure out, because like last year's end plate had like a big bump in it. I need to figure out how to get it on a wall somehow.
Yeah.
And I was given, at McLaren, I designed an oil pump for a gearbox. And I was given the oil pump and it's got like all the little internals and stuff in it. So that's not as impressive, but it's a very cool piece of kit.
Yeah. Most embarrassing moment you had during a race weekend?
Oh, yeah. So I've had hundreds.
Yeah.
I think everyone's had hundreds. I think the two that spring to mind is in Spa, there's like some metal stairs that have been there forever and they're really slippy. So at one point I fell down the stairs. And I'm pretty sure it was Ricardo was at the bottom and picked me up. And I was like, oh, shit. But then I think the probably most embarrassing one is the factory's really close to Silverstone race. So I would cycle across to the race. And as I was cycling, a car started in front of me, so I had to stop really suddenly, fine. But I needed to I was clipped in, so I was trying to get going again. And I put all my effort in to get going. But I realised my chain had come off, so I basically just flipped myself off the bike. But that happened as a van load of McLaren mechanics came past, and it was about 2 years after I left McLaren.
Shit.
So they had wound down the windows and were shouting out at me, and nobody was helping. Everyone was just and by the time I got to the paddock, now covered in grease, it seemed like everybody knew I'd fallen off my bike. Everyone was it was. That's the one that sticks with me the most. I was very careful every year after that cycling. And
fair enough. If you could have one superpower beyond riding a bike, what would it be?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I think probably always having better hair. I think when you're sat on the pit wall, you're always why does the back of my hair always look so shit? Yeah, or teleportation. Sitting in airports, getting on flights. You feel I've lost days of my life. At one point I discussed trying to keep track of the amount of time that year I spent at a conveyor belt.
Oh wow.
Because it's a lot of time. So if I could just get there, that would be amazing.
Nice. What celebrity would be a great fit for as an F1 driver?
I think it needs to be someone some sort of comedian would be great, I think. Or some of the guys that do loads of stunt, someone the Tom Cruise types, but I don't know.
Yeah, we got Tom Cruise before.
We got Tom Cruise before. Share your prediction for this coming F1 season. In 2023, your Constructors Champion and your Drivers Champion.
I think that, again, this is one that's based on what I maybe hope or want to happen. I think hopefully it's going to be really tight. I would, in many ways, love to see Leclerc and Ferrari do it. Because I think Ferrari probably had the car at least at the start of last year, and hopefully they come out of the box a bit better this year. So yeah, I'm gonna hedge my bets on that.
Cool. Nice. Okay, this is the last question.
Okay,
you're writing an autobiography on yourself. Which one resonates with you the most? We got the Daredevil, the Dreamcatcher, the Free Spirit, or the Hardest Worker.
Mine's probably the Hardest Worker. At least some time ago before I quit.
Yeah. Fantastic. That is the rapid fire round. I think that's another purple.
That is a purple.
Right?
That is a purple promotional poll.
Even though there's a veto there.
Yes, there was. Let's take a Purple. Let's give her purple.
There we go. Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on, Bernie. We really appreciate it. We end every interview asking our guests, how do you want to be remembered? What sort of legacy do you want to leave behind? You have a 30-second answer for that.
Another hot round.
Yeah. None of my answers have been 30 seconds. I think, just as someone who is kind and worked hard. Yeah. I don't like the rest of it. I think you're forgotten pretty quickly in this industry. So as long as I wasn't unkind, then that'll be okay.
Fantastic. Well, really appreciate you coming on. Where can people follow you on social media if they want to stay tuned?
Yeah, so I'm Bernie Collins1 on my Instagram. And I think the same on my Twitter. So just get me there.
Perfect. We'll put all of those socials in the show description, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. Feel free to go and check our other episodes on tracklimitspod.com. Give us a follow on social media, and we'll see you guys at the next episode.